Hey everyone, welcome to the 354th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a busy show for you today. We are going to be talking about, that Google Sonos ITC decision, Amazon's Pro Sidewalk network, why IoT sensors need standards. Also, we're going to be hitting up the pay what you want plans for IoT subscriptions. Kevin is down on RF sensing when it comes to Soli. We'll talk more about that. The chip shortage is causing some interesting problems for companies that rely on DRM. We've got a couple quick stories about new malware, which is crazy, new wearable for health tracking from Abbott Labs, new sensor from Netatmo, and an acquisition in the industrial IoT. We're also going to hear from our sponsor, Twilio. And our interview this week is with Yoon-Ho Choi, who's the president of the Home Connectivity Alliance. I promised you he'd be here, and now he's here talking about why a bunch of appliance makers are getting together to work on interoperability. All this and more await you. But first, let's hear from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Silicon Labs, and they invite you to the open house of their new 3D smart home experience. You can take a self-guided virtual tour to explore cutting-edge smart home technology, review the unique benefits of each wireless protocol, and you can learn how to connect all those ecosystems. As you tour the house, you'll learn about wireless solutions connecting each device, read real-world case studies, and gain access to resources to jumpstart your smart home device development. Welcome in at solutions.scilabs.com/homes. Okay, and now let's talk crappy things happening in the world of smart home stuff. So we had talked about this a couple months back. Sonos had sued Google for infringing on its patents. We were waiting for that to happen. They sued both here, like in the US, but they also sued through the International Trade Commission. This is the ITC. And the ITC is actually a little bit more, it's kind of a Hail Mary, but if it works, they're like, boom. If they decide in your favor, the company who's infringing on your patents has to stop importing them. It's a pretty big deal. So the ITC Commission said that, yeah, Google's products infringe on 5 Sonos patents. And Sonos really wanted Google to pay them. That's why Sonos, they actually filed a lawsuit against Google and Amazon. Sonos was not after stopping. Sonos was like, I will license this to you. However, Google's like, I don't think so. And so what happened is Google is now rolling out updates that basically take away your ability to control your Nest audio speakers.
Well, if they're in groups.
If they're in groups. So if your because it's the patents are related to grouping speakers.
Right.
So you can no longer adjust the volume of multiple speakers in a group with a single volume control. That sucks.
Yeah. Defeats the purpose of the group.
Yeah. And you can't do it with your phone. You can't do it in the app. You can't do it with the phone's physical buttons, and you can't do it via voice. And as further crappiness, if you have a speaker group that includes non-Google stuff that's using Cast, you actually have to update those devices because they will not work until they get updated with this feature that will break the group control. So you have to update to something that's going to break your functionality to keep Google in compliance with this ITC ruling.
So Sonos didn't get what it wanted, which was, as you had pointed out, either some compensation or the ability to license the patented intellectual property to Google. I believe the courts gave Google 30 days to bring their products into compliance. So that's why the mad rush to make these changes with the apps and everything else. And yes, it is a loss of functionality until or if and when Google can resolve that, change it, do it a different way that doesn't infringe, although I don't really see how they're going to do that. So that's why, even though the ITC could stop Google from importing the speakers, which are made overseas here, say to the US or something, they're not going to be stopped from importing them because, again, they had 30 days to mitigate. So
there are also other patents. This is not finished. You may see more diminished functionality as more rulings come down, just so y'all know.
In a way, this is a little bit of a hollow victory to me for Sonos, and I am surprised that they won it, but, hey.
The ITC courts they're just weird. It's a real crapshoot.
Yeah. And ultimately, who suffers? That's going to be us, exactly. Yep. Now, so, to be honest, I don't actually use any speaker groups.
I do.
Plus you have non-Google speakers because you have the Lenovo, for example.
Well, I have 2 Nest audio speakers that I bought purposefully to group as a speaker set in my house. And I did it because I wanted better sound. And remember how I tried like the Echo Studio, I tried the Echo 4th generation, I actually tried the HomePods, or the HomePod minis. And the Nest Audio actually sounded the best for me. So that's the one I went with.
Well, they did advertise it as simple controls of speaker groups. Maybe you could sue them now.
That is an interesting idea. Like, will we get a lawsuit? And it's not too late for Google to make this right. I mean, it is incredibly frustrating. And, I had been a Sonos user for years. And I got rid of all my Sonos stuff because I wanted the smart speaker capability. And Sonos, you had to pick and choose, and it was, and Sonos was much more expensive, I'll be honest.
Oh, yes.
So, did I cheap out? Yes. But I thought I was Google's not like a fly-by-night company. So
right. And this doesn't address any other companies that offer similar functionality. Like, I don't know what the status of those are, but Amazon, Apple, how are they potentially impacted by this in the future? I don't know.
I don't either. And this is all up in the air, but there's a clear bad actor in this situation from a consumer perspective, and that is Google. They made a bet that they weren't infringing, or if they were infringing, they could get away with it. It's unclear what that bet was. I'm not inside their boardrooms. And when that bet failed, they decided to take it out on the consumer. And this is not okay. And this is actually where the FTC's anti-monopoly kind of stuff gets really interesting, because I'm kind of like, I don't have a lot of options here. And if I want the functionality that comes with the Google stuff, then I can't get the Sonos stuff. But anyway, this is just me being frustrated. Let's move on.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say if they name Apple in a case, Apple considers buying Sonos completely.
Yeah, that would suck too, for so many reasons.
You're like, okay,
I'm a HomeKit person. I'm fine.
I'm fine with that.
All right, moving right along. Let's talk about Amazon. And last week's one of the big stories from CES, which was not a CES story.
And why is that?
Well, there was some embargo issues, but that's the backroom shenanigans that happened.
No. Before the news actually was embargoed.
Oh, yeah.
A certain podcast.
A certain enterprising reporter / Kevin Toffel.
Yeah, we back in December found in the FTC filings that we were browsing through a reader tip, I should add. Somebody had reached out to us and told us they saw this on the FTC site, but I dissected it and saw the Ring Bridge Pro and saw hints of this not being a consumer product. In fact, it was explicitly said to the FTC that this would be a professionally installed product and so on. And we talked about it on the podcast 3 weeks before CES, at least.
Yes. And then I talked to Stefano Landi, who is the Amazon Sidewalk director. He's relatively new there. And they were going to launch this at CES. And then they didn't because Amazon left CES. They didn't show up at CES. But the news still got out. And thus, now we know officially that we were correct. The Bridge Pro is going to be mounted on rooftops, cell towers. It can provide connectivity for up to 5 miles, which is quite good. And Amazon has partnered with some universities, including Arizona State University, to test Sidewalk for environmental sensors on their campus.
Go Sun Devils.
Yay. The other thing worth noting in my conversation with Stefano was that Amazon doesn't plan to charge for that it's Sidewalk uses both Bluetooth and LoRaWAN. So this is a low power wide area network for IoT devices, basically things that send a little bit of data over a long range. So if you're going to use the Sidewalk network as a developer, you're not going to pay for connectivity. Now, all the Sidewalk data goes back into the AWS cloud. So you will need to have an AWS cloud subscription and pay for that. But after that, you can send that to wherever you want. That's something that may be addressed and that may change in the future, but I kind of doubt it because this is Amazon's MO all over, which is like build a pipeline into their back end and then make you pay for that.
Try and monetize it later.
Yeah. So this is great. This is really going to change the low power wide area network landscape. And I'm really excited to see this because Sidewalk, it's proprietary. It's proprietary because Amazon's installed a lot of security elements on top of it. So that plus a bunch of news on the LoRaWAN front make me feel like we're about to enter into this, like 2022 will be the race between LoRaWAN and Sidewalk for connectivity options. And I'm excited about that.
Well, and not that I'm not excited, but I kind of reset my expectations on LoRaWAN in general after CES because I didn't see what I hoped to see, and that was some actual end user consumer devices that can be used on this network. And I did find like scores of devices that are supported on LoRaWAN networks, but 90% of them are business enterprise type things for the most part. And I think that rubs me the wrong way because, at least in the Amazon Sidewalk pit, because as a consumer, for me to help Amazon, I'm giving them up to 500 megabytes of my home internet each month. That's how the data gets from the Sidewalk network to Amazon. But as a consumer, what benefits am I getting? Like if I was getting some kind of benefit by being able to just go out and buy a bunch of different devices that I could use on this network, I would feel better about it.
So it's a little early. I get you. I really do. But think about this. Amazon just turned on the Sidewalk network in June of last year. So that's only 6 months. Now they're seeing the holes. They're adding this pro line so they can build out wider coverage area. 2, the other LPWAN networks out there have done a lot of work in the last probably 3 to 6 months to expand their coverage. So you saw Senate do their deal where they collaborated with Helium to roam onto that network. Just this last week, Senate did a deal to add satellite connectivity. So I think we're actually still pretty early because the networks are still coming together. And this is the hardest part about building a network. You have to have a big enough network to convince people to build devices for it, right? Mm-hmm. But you also have to pay for that network while you're doing that. It's hard. So I think this year is when we're going to see more devices. I'm actually in line to test some new consumer-oriented LoRaWAN devices that will run on the Senate network and the Helium network, not the Sidewalk network. So even developers can't access the Sidewalk network just yet. So don't get your hopes too crushed because I think next year at CES is when we're going to see those things.
Okay. You get me, and I will give you a year.
Yay!
And then I'll extend my dreams one more year.
Yeah, because the reason why there's so many enterprise ones is because historically, LoRaWAN networks were deployed in campus or private enterprise settings. And so there's tons of sensors for that because that market has been built and established. So, I know. Anyway, okay. Let's talk about standards for sensors. I love this story. This is a story from the IEEE, and you know I'm a giant IEEE nerd anyway. And the writers of this article basically call for the IEEE to develop standards for sensors. And they list a couple of the ones that they've been working on and developing. These are around things like automotive camera systems, and they need a reference point for calibration and measurement for image quality. And before y'all get we don't need any more of this, know that in the United States and in other parts of the world, there are standardization efforts for weights and measurements for all kinds of things. Everything from the official kilogram weight to calibration of gas pumps is actually handled by various state agencies. So this is not a weird ask, especially when we're using these sensors to do things like drive a car or decide air pollution in a city and understanding, making policies based on that.
I think it's good. I'm certainly generally in favor of standards versus a Wild Wild West show. But I also wonder, how far do you go to the point where maybe competing products can't compete anymore because they're all essentially the same?
Well, so I think when you get to a certain point, like let's say air quality detection, you're going to have to build it's okay to have commodity parts. That's the way the world works. You build something new and you're like, oh my gosh, I have a new sensor that does like RF sensing or radar. I'm so cool. And then you build that out, you build a use case. And then what happens is more people try to come into that market because it's growing. And then it becomes basic infrastructure. You can't keep basic infrastructure as a proprietary product if you actually want it to become part of the basic infrastructure. And once you do that, you do need to have standards so people can track, like if I buy an air quality sensor from SensorTech versus some unnamed Chinese company, and I'm going to use that to find polluters, the polluters are going to want to know that each of those work the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it sucks when your product becomes commodified because it's just so integral to the way the world works, but that's how the world works.
Makes sense.
I don't know. I think it's really important because how else are we going to move beyond things like in medical? How are we going to move beyond digital snake oil, right? How are we going to actually rely on this information rather than it just be a gimmick?
Yep.
Anyway.
Makes sense.
Kevin's like, okay, Stacey, I can tell you care about this.
No. You're right. I just wonder where you draw the line, and you've illustrated to a point why you can't draw it too early.
Yeah, you just draw it. It gets drawn over time.
Right.
I mean, you can't ever rest on your laurels, man. You got to just always keep moving on, right? I feel so strongly about this because I feel like the telcos have historically held back innovation because of their pricing on broadband. And they've done it because they refuse to become infrastructure. But they clearly are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, let's talk about pay what you want pricing. IFT did this like over a year ago for their service. I'm still paying, I think, $3.99 a month for my IFT Pro subscription, even though they really want me to pay about, I think it was $5.99 or $6.99. But they're waiting for me to like decide I see that much value in them. Anyway.
They're waiting for you to feel guilty, in other words.
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I pay for things that I pay for lots of things. Anyway, Wise is actually doing the same thing. They're giving person detection to all users at whatever price they want to pay, even if you don't want to pay anything.
Yeah, they're calling this service Cam Plus Lite. They offer a paid service called Cam Plus, but if you don't pay for Cam Plus, you can get the Lite version for free, or whatever price you'd like to pay. This is going to let you get 12-second cloud recordings. This is going to give you Wise person detection as well. Not this specific person is in front of the camera, but a person is in front of the camera. They're also getting rid of the 32 gig micro SD card size limit because they got an XFAT or XFAT license, I believe, to expand the file system on SD cards, which is good. If you're already paying for Cam Plus, you're gonna get this at no extra charge on any cameras not covered by your subscription currently, because it's like maybe you have 10 cameras and only 4 are covered with your subscription. So you'll get Cam Plus Lite on the other 6 in that example.
Nice. Wise mentioned way back, actually, I don't know if it was way back, but a couple months ago when they announced funding, they talked about the challenges they went through. And one of the challenges they incurred was that they were basically trying to convince venture capitalists to fund them without having a recurring revenue model. And VCs did not want to do that. So this feels like a way to goose their revenue, to get a recurring revenue, to continue growing their recurring revenue model in a way that continues to respect the end user, because that is very much a wise thing to do. They're like, we listen to our users, we respond to you, blah, 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 blah. So,
yeah, they've already done the hard work of creating these services, so it's not like there's any additional effort or cost to them to offer it other than the cloud storage itself for the videos.
right. Which does actually have quite a cost.
It's kind of like a Tesla approach in a sense, except that's not pay your own price for, say, full self-driving.
I was like,
that's now $12,000. That just got bumped $2,000.
Yeah. I was like, how is this like Tesla?
Hard pass for me. Well, what I'm saying is all the work is, yes, still being done on full self-driving, but all the hardware is in the cars for the most part.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's just flip a switch. Kind of like when people could upgrade their range by paying an extra fee because they all had the same large batteries. They could just flip a switch software-wise and get you range.
Got it. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Moving right along. Let's talk about Project Soli. And Kevin, you crushed my soul today.
Yeah, I gave Project Soli some tough love, but I think in our discussion before the show, I think Stacy gets where I'm coming from. So let me just real quick explain. If you're not familiar with Project Soli, it is part of Google's ATAP division, Advanced Technology and Product Team. They launched this Project Soli in 2015. It is a very, very small chip that, and we've had debates over this, but I think it's safe to say it uses radio frequency waves in a radar-like approach. Would that be accurate?
Actually, Soli radar is using ultra-wideband, but it's not clear what spectrum band it's using.
All right. So there you go.
That is the scoop.
That is the scoop. We didn't see any products come out until 2019 with Project Soli, and that was the Pixel 4. We saw demos at Google I/O. In fact, in 2016, they were showing very fine-grained, fine precision gestures that were read from a smartwatch. They were showing similar things with smart speakers. But 2019 is really when it came to the market in a product, and that was the Pixel 4. You may know this feature as Motion Sense. You may also know this feature as not being well received because it was very limited. Google said you can control your Pixel without touching it, but really all it was a way to wave your hand to mute your phone's notifications, play, pause, skip music tracks. And even then, it took a very big wave. So it was not a very good implementation, I guess I would say, of what the product was. It disappeared until this past year, 2021. And Stacy, you tested the next product with Project Soli, and that was the latest Google Nest Hub, and they use it for sleep tracking.
Yes, and it works really well.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good. Other than that, though, Google's abandoned it on the phones. It didn't come in the 4A, 5, 5A, 6, 6 Pro, and more recently, CES. In fact, this was a very quiet announcement, which I don't quite understand who made it because it's on the CTA or Consumer Tech Association website. And the CTA are the people who put the CES show on. It's a small announcement that Google is open sourcing APIs for Project Soli. So, A, why did CTA announce this? B, what's going on inside at Google here? My take is Google's still searching for a problem to solve with their solution. Quite honestly, I appreciate the technology. I appreciate the engineering behind all this. But most of the implementations that have been shown or used, other than the Nest for the sleep tracking, have been precision-based within like an inch or two of a display. And at that point, you're already 99% of the way there with your hands, so why not just tap the screen anyway? I don't see the benefit there. I don't think they've really figured out what is the problem that they're trying to solve. There's a little bit of information on this open source effort, which is called Ripple, which I find confusing also because that is a cryptocurrency coin.
Yes, it is.
It's been around for years. Interestingly, when I dug around into the news, I saw they were pointing to a GitHub code repository for this new API. I see that the repository was just created on December 7th, and there's all of 3 API files that were added January 5th, which was like the second day of CES. So there's not a lot there. It seems very rushed to me. As far as partners so far, Google is obviously one. 3 are chip makers, Infineon, NXP, and TI. I believe Infineon made the original Project Soli chip for the Pixel 4. And then there are 2 more partners, Blumio, who doesn't have a product yet, but they're working on smart blood pressure sensors, and Ford, of all companies, which obviously does have products. So that's good. That's like the best part of these partners, in my opinion. But I'm kind of at a loss here.
So I think these participants are interesting simply because they are core members. They're already building ultra wideband chips and radar chips. And it's worth noting that you can use ultra wideband for radar, but you can use ultra wideband for other things as well. So those two don't necessarily have to go together, which is going to help with confusion because like Apple has ultra wideband and it may be slightly different. So with what Google's doing and with the participants here, we could see things like opening car doors, which might be why Ford's there, or it could be for their automation in their factories. There's actually something using radar called the FIRA Alliance. Apple's actually a member. So is like Texas Instruments. I don't know if Ford is, but that's actually designed for fine range location sensing inside like factory plants. So when you get really close to something from a safety perspective, it might recognize you instantly and stop. So there are a lot of use cases. This is a very broad technology. And I think what Google's probably realized is it's not a broad technology that they're going to be able to capitalize on with the products they have. Precisely for the reasons that you're saying, Kevin. Once you're on a consumer device, it may not make a lot of sense. Once you're most of the way there, why keep going? The way Soli is implemented is it is very close proximity. You can also do ultra wideband though to detect things a bit further away, like in the room. And so it doesn't have to be that close. For the finer measurements, it does need to be, you need to have more antennas. There's a lot of design compromises that happen there. So I think this is a really interesting thing that Google's kind of basically saying, this is technology with potential. We're not going to invest in this potential because this particular use case that we found just doesn't move the needle for us. But it might end up being interesting if enough people adopt it to find a home someplace else. So
yeah, and that's fair. And that's fair. It's just been so focused on solving a people problem.
Yeah.
Up till now. And I mean, they even had dev kits but developers, I'm sure they did some great things with it. I saw some little app examples, where you could wave to a Pokemon. Okay, if you want to do that, sure, that would solve that problem. But it seems almost like a pivot in what it will be used for, like you said.
Yeah. And, the other thing is if it's used in enough places for other use cases, it might get cheap enough that you could put it on a device so you could wave to a Pokemon, right? So
I will never wave to a Pokemon. Let me just make that very clear right now.
Okay, fine. I was like, maybe you could pet your Eevee. Okay, moving right along. So, the chip shortage, y'all.
The never-ending chip shortage.
It really is a problem. I'll be writing about that actually later this month, so get ready. This is kind of like a Schadenfreude situation here. But Canon, it can't get enough toner chips, so its DRM is flagging its toner cartridges and saying, hey, this isn't legit. You're missing the chip. And Canon's like, yeah, here's how you disable that. And I just want to say that, yay. The one good thing that comes out of this is, what if it breaks DRM for people? Because they're like, yeah, I don't want to spend money on this. I mean, think about this. These chips cost money. They have to engineer them in there. You're paying for them to be like, no, you can't use the toner you want to use. You have to use our branded toner. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I never liked this whole approach from Canon
to Keurig.
Or others who have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Keurig. You can only use the Keurig K-Cups.
The Coke Freestyle machines do it. they're turning on technology in the freestyle machines that if you don't have a cup that communicates with the machine and it only does a certain number of refills, then you don't get your Coke or water.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand what they're trying to prevent, but with the printers, they went too far, considering there's a massive market for third-party toner cartridges, inkjet cartridges, etc. And you can now use them on the Canons because you get a message that says, hey, this is not legit toner. You can say, that's okay, I agree to use it and deal with it. So.
All right, in little news bits, Raspberry Pi can detect malware using electromagnetic waves. This is pretty cool. Researchers from the Research Institute of Computer Science and Random Systems, ooh, that's a fun company, fun organization. They basically scan for certain electromagnetic waves, and they use a Pi to help govern a sensor, and it basically detects threats that based off of field changes in the magnetic waves. So that's kind of fun.
I mean, they know what EM signals a healthy, quote unquote, healthy device should be sending out. So if there's something abnormal in those signals, they can train the system to say that might be malware.
Yeah, and it can detect what device it's coming from, which is also cool if you have a bajillion devices running around. So fun. Abbott Labs at CES. This was very cool. They announced something called Lingo. This is going to be their new category of wearable technologies that will track glucose, ketones, lactate, and alcohol. And this is actually, what was it? I guess the last CES we did in person, so that would be 2020. We saw actually a lot of these kind of biomarker tracking devices at the startup level. So Abbott is a big name in the medical device industry. They're building out their own sensors under this Lingo brand. Now, here's the thing. These are not going to be they're not intended for people with like diabetes. And so these are for casual people. I kind of feel like
So non-FDA approved.
Non-FDA approved. And
they didn't request FDA approval. I don't want to say that the FDA doesn't approve them.
Right. Sorry. They haven't gone through that process, and they haven't gone through it for like accuracy levels for tracking diseases. So this has been a trend in like wearables and fitness right now, is that you can track your glucose and add that data into a lot of like your Fitbit will track it now. Whoop Wearables tracks it. And you put that in here, and then it'll be like, hey, your glucose spikes at this time after eating these things. And you're supposed to like follow that and figure out like what you should be eating to like lose weight or work out the hardest. I don't know.
And a few shows ago, we talked about U.S. legislation that has not been passed yet, but there were some stipulations in there that car makers would have to cease or stop people who are impaired by alcohol from operating a vehicle. Something like this actually could work.
Yeah, I'd want FDA approval for that, though. I'd want to check to make sure they can get it.
I want legit blood alcohol content levels. I want that
standardization or some sort of like certification of that sensor.
It's too high by 0.1. It's not calibrated properly, officer.
Exactly. That's actually that gets you out a lot of radar gun tickets. Anyway.
Does it really?
Oh, yeah.
I've never tried. I'm afraid to.
Okay. Well, hey. NetAtmo, they now have their first thread-based sensor that will become compatible with Matter. Yay! It's also compatible with HomeKit. This is a security sensor, it's a contact sensor, and it's also a motion sensor. We shall say no more of this. It lives. If you're interested in this, great. It's available. The other news we have is Aptiv has acquired Wind River. And Wind River is an industrial IoT kind of middleware software provider. So we don't talk about them a lot, but they've been around for years. Intel purchased them. They used to be like an embedded RTOS kind of system. They've been around for so long. And then Intel was like, oh, we're going to use them for our IoT stuff. And then they were like, no, we're going to spin it out. And now Aptiv is going to buy it for $4.3 billion. And Aptiv is a giant software company that makes software mostly used for automotive. And this makes sense. That's who was using Wind River. So Yay, big deal in that space. Consolidation, IoT, industrial IoT middleware kind of effort. Yay. All right, that concludes the news segment of the show. Let us now go to the part of the podcast where we talk to you, our listeners. Welcome to the IoT Podcast Hotline, which is sponsored by Very. Very is a fully distributed IoT engineering firm that partners with its clients to build systems for smart manufacturing, smart energy, utilities, consumer electronics, and connected wellness. You can discover what Very's multidisciplinary teams can do for you at verypossible.com/services. And if you would like to be a part of the show, give us a call at 512-623-7424, and you will be entered to win a Maras Smart Garage Door Opener. And we're giving this away because it's actually, I feel like you should have one. That's really why.
I have one. It's very handy, very useful. And what's really nice is it works with pretty much every ecosystem. So Amazon, Google, Apple, SmartThings, and yeah, it's just great. I love mine.
So Kevin loves his. I love my Chamberlain MyQ. You know, honestly, if you wanted that over the Maras one, I'm sure we could figure that out. But basically, the point is you should have a smart garage door opener, not because you're going to use your phone or your voice to open your garage door, but because you set it up so it will let you know if your garage door is open. And then you can be like, after like 10 minutes have passed, you'll get a notification on your phone. It'll be like, hey, you left your garage door open. And then you can close it. It's great.
Or you could even do what I do and say, if the garage door is left open for more than 10 minutes, close it for me.
Magic. And you can also use that with some platforms to trigger other things. I used to have one where when my garage door opened, it would actually turn on the porch lights, which was handy because I had to walk outside my garage to my front door up a flight of stairs. So it was nice that the lights turned on automatically. Anyway, all right. So that's what you win if you call us during the month of January. Give us a call at 512-623-7424. And we're just going to do some cleanup this week. So first up, a couple weeks ago, we answered a question about Wi-Fi sensors. It was Wi-Fi sensors. And we explained why there weren't a lot of those. But I actually missed one that I've actually tested. It's the Soli Wi-Fi motion detection sensor. So we actually missed one. It is the Soli motion Wi-Fi sensor, and it's only $40. And you can buy it at Soli. You can buy it at Amazon. You don't need a hub. It will work with your router and the Soli software on your phone. Soli works with lots and lots of other things. It's a nice platform. The sensor is okay. There is kind of, I'm going to say, some latency associated with it that I'm like, it's not the best or the most immediate sensor I've encountered, but it is Wi-Fi. And yeah.
It's one of the few.
It's one of a few. And I will just say that looking at the reviews on Amazon, people hate this device. But I tried it. I was able to get it set up, and it worked with it worked with like Madam A and that sort of thing. So, try it and see if you like it, but be aware that apparently a lot of people hate it. So that is a addition to the answer from a couple weeks ago. And then I also wanted to play one of the voicemails we got from a listener related to our conversation about voice-powered microwaves. And basically, I thought this was a good reminder that we should continuously think about smart home stuff and its applicability for accessibility for people. So we're going to play that message and remember. So we're going to play that message now.
Hi, Steve and Kevin. Love the show. This is Nick, and I was just replying to the comment you made this past show about the voice control microwave ovens. They're good for people like me. I'm legally blind, and so I don't have to worry about the keypad. I just felt like right now I'm using the Amazon system to microwave and a certain amount of time, so it works for me. Anyway, you can have a nice, happy New Year, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
I made this mistake twice now in this series of maybe 3 short months, and shame on me. My New Year's resolution is to remember about accessibility, options, challenges, improvements on smart home devices, IoT in general. I've got to get my mind around that, and shame on me for that.
So we weren't going to drag Kevin over the coals here, but
No, I should be. It's that very good reminder, totally legit concern and point of view that I need to keep in my head. I always think about, call it the 80% of the market and not say the 20%. I'm not saying those are the actual numbers, but that's how my mind thinks. And I need to stop doing that.
So that concludes the IoT podcast hotline segment of the show. You can call us and be entered to win a smart garage door opener at 512-623-7424. And now we will move along to hear from Yoon-Ho Choi, the president of the Home Connectivity Alliance, talking about an interoperability standard for smart appliances. Before we get to that, we'll hear from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Twilio. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. And our sponsor this week is Twilio. So if you've been listening to us over the last few weeks, you already know about Twilio IoT and its Super SIM platform. But there's more. Twilio is now moving deeper into the IoT stack, and I have with me Jonathan Williams from the product management team at Twilio IoT to tell us more. So how's it going, Jonathan?
Hi, Stacey. Great to speak with you again. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So Twilio doesn't just offer IoT connectivity. You do have a new platform for device makers, yes?
That's right. Yes. So through the acquisition of Electric Imp, which is coming up for 2 years ago now, Twilio IoT also has products in the device builder space, most recently with our new Twilio Microvisor offering.
Yeah, Microvisor. So I covered the launch back in late 2020. What is it and why is it different?
Well, that's a great question. So Microvisor, I like to think, is a whole new approach to IoT devices that really turns the idea of a device builder platform on its head. So gone are the old days where to use an IoT device builder platform, you kind of had to conform to the restrictive, specific ways of the platform approach. Here, we offer a hypervisor for microcontrollers, which means that you as the embedded software developer get complete control over your on-chip code, the language, and the development environment, while benefiting from a lifetime of security and connectivity management. So you get to focus entirely on your code and application, and the Twilio Microvisor takes care of all of the tricky connectivity and security components that your device needs.
That's all very essential. So what kind of customers would Twilio Microvisor work for?
In terms of customers today, we have a wide range of customers already accessing the Microvisor on the private beta. And I think when it comes to the use case and application, then obviously customers looking for security in their IoT devices and the longevity of solutions. So one thing that we do is we provide a lifetime of security upgrades to your device. So this really suits enterprise customers with industrial applications.
That sounds great. So can our listeners easily give Twilio Microvisor a try?
Indeed, they can. We are currently in private beta and are accepting applications for our beta program. Head over to Twilio/Microvisor. That's twil.io, as in Twilio, /Microvisor. There, you can sign up to get access to the documentation, the hardware, and access to the Microvisor itself for evaluation.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Yoon-Ho Choi, who is the president of the Home Connectivity Alliance. Hello, Yoon-Ho. How are you doing today?
Hey, Stacey. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm really excited because there's nothing I love more in the world than, interoperability and a new standards effort for that. So, woo! Let's just kick it off by having you tell everybody what the heck the Home Connectivity Alliance is trying to do.
Home Connectivity Alliance is a coalition of manufacturers, but very focused set of manufacturers. So it's a manufacturers who, produce large products, large appliances, that sit in your home for a very long time, right? So it's the refrigerators, the washers. The second set is the HVAC folks, right? So this is the air conditioning, the ventilation that is in your home. And then the third one is interestingly, it's the TVs and home entertainment group, right? So all of these products share a certain, similarities in terms of character, which is that they sit in your home for a long time. These are not products you buy every couple of years. So they have a long life cycle and they're rather large investments. This category of products and the manufacturers behind it is the Home Connectivity Alliance. And the thing that we are trying to do is that there's three things actually this group of manufacturers are trying to do. First one is the one you mentioned. It's the interoperability. So we have a very narrow focus on these category of products and making them interoperable through cloud to cloud. And I'll talk a little bit about more on the cloud to cloud portion, why cloud to cloud, but it's interoperability. Second one is to make sure that data security and physical safety on these products work reliably in the digital landscape. And the third one is through this interoperability, the group wants to focus on really the innovation that comes from coming together and making these interoperable.
All right. We will tackle those one by one, and we have lots of questions coming up. But first, let's just focus on who's involved. You've got Samsung, which is the company you work for, Haier, which
correct.
is GE Appliances, American Standard, Electrolux, Train, and Arçelik. It's a Turkish company, makes the Beko brand. So I feel like this is a great start. Are y'all recruiting? I feel like I want to see LG or Whirlpool on here.
We definitely are. We are in conversations with most of the major manufacturers. We certainly want to see LG and Whirlpool and Bosch as part of the Home Connectivity Alliance. And you have to remember that this long-lasting appliance category, group, if you look at the industry, it's not hundreds of companies. In fact, it's tens of companies, probably under 30 that make up most of the industry. It's large groups that's been around for, a long time. These group of companies coming together to transform into this digital landscape is pretty exciting for us.
Let's just go right into what most people are going to be focused on, which is the idea of interoperability. This is a very disparate group of devices that you have a focus on. The washers, dryers, refrigerators, ovens, that all's like, oh yeah, those are appliances. But the TVs are a little unique, I would say. And, robot appliances also a little unique, or maybe not in the same category in my worldview. So can you talk to me about what types of interoperability you're hoping to see with these devices?
One of the things that's pretty exciting is that, and to keep in mind, is that most of these devices that I mentioned, Stacey, has what I call first jobs, right? So before they are connected, before the interoperability piece, each of its, the devices have the first job they need to do, right? So the washers need to wash their clothes. Even if they're connected, if they aren't washing your clothes well, nothing's happening, right? Refrigerators need to keep our food fresh, but, and on and on, right? The first jobs that these products need to do. So each of them need to do that job well. But when you make these interoperable, there are certain benefits that come even beyond just the convenience part.
So what are some of the use cases you're envisioning?
So there's a few. When you have products from different brands, multiple product categories working together, a whole sort of new feature sets open up, right? So first of all, for example, I know you've even talked about the washer and dryer use case, right? So a washer does something, washes clothing in a certain mode. The dryer understands that mode and sets itself to that, right? So that's something that through interoperability, devices know what each other is doing and then kind of gets it ready for the next step. Robo vacuum cleaners working with air purifiers and then with air conditioners, right? So when you have these cleaning/purification devices working together from multiple brands, it does a better job of keeping the home cleaner. When you have this sort of mix and match of products working together, we see efficiencies, we see better performance. Another one is that, these are large devices working together, and these devices takes a good big chunk of the the energy use in your home. When they work together and when each device, when we're able to know the energy data that's accurate, then we are able to do things to manage that, right? So everything from time shifting to how the devices are used at what times of the day, we have opportunities for energy savings, right? And because these devices take up the majority of the energy use in your home, energy is an area that we are excited about. The last one is maybe the predictive maintenance part of it. Because these devices are used for such a long periods of time, we have the opportunity to track and understand kind of the way they perform and hopefully predict before something goes wrong, before you have an emergency with your refrigerator. We're able to notify and then do dispatch even, right? So the predictive maintenance and maintenance of like large devices, systems like HVAC become pretty important to us.
And so on that use cases, I feel like the appliance manufacturers have already been researching that, building up models for, various different anomaly detection on their device to diagnose things. What is the benefit for having the HCA involved in that?
First one is that it's because of this, the group HCA coalition, we are able to come together, and this is a forum for ourselves as well, right? So this is a forum where we can come together and share a lot of knowledge and then really kind of build off the best practices of each other in the connected, scope. Right. So as we do this, we think that we have an opportunity to kind of deep think together about how we can better serve our consumers in the long run. Beyond just us competing against each other, we do think of this as a forum where we can kind of, share thoughts and share really the thinking behind how we can leverage this as an industry.
Okay, so y'all might come up with models that work across your different brands and apply those to those devices. It could be a way to do best practices across brands.
That's certainly one of them, yes.
Okay, now let's talk on a technical level how this is going to happen. So what y'all are envisioning isn't like a radio protocol like Thread or anything like that. This is much more matching data models. I don't even know if it's like application layer work, like the Matter working group will release an SDK that allows the devices to interoperate. So what are you envisioning technically happening or being the technical product of the HCA?
Well, I think we've gone through an extensive evaluation to see if, number one, should this be part of Matter? Number two, are we in fact trying to develop a standard or a brand new standard here? And I think the conclusion we came to was that for our devices, because of the long life cycle that they have, and because of the nature of the products that they are, I think we went to the route that we said, okay, this does need a specific focus in terms of technical, and I think we said that we have consciously decided not to reinvent, and to go after building a brand new, standard, right? We want to leverage as much of the infrastructure that's already there in the market. Many of our products are deployed with Wi-Fi. They're already in the market, and they're going to, whether a new standard or not, they're going to be in your home for, a good 5, 7, 10 years, right? So we want to also include those legacy devices, right? That's already in the market. We went down when we are heading down with a narrow focus on cloud to cloud integration. So you are correct in many ways when you say, our first focus is going to be aligning the data models and then providing, of course, the layers of security, cybersecurity, as well as guidelines for manufacturers to adopt these data models and different APIs to make sure that we can do it with this efficiency, right? So instead of reinventing anything technical, a new standard, right? And because we've all been through that many times, many of the HCA members are also members of, CSA/Matter, right? So, we have a vested interest in all of these coming together. For HCA specifically, what we are not trying to do is create another standard for standard's sake. In fact, we want to leverage as much as what we what we can that's out there.
It does. And I spent that whole time wondering, is he going to mention the XKCD comic on standards? Because that's about the point where everyone does it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about why cloud to cloud.
For our devices, it's a little different than like light bulbs where you kind of switch it on and you want to see that thing come on immediately, right? So we highly appreciate, for example, what Matter and CSA is doing. We, in fact, also need that, right? So we think that's wonderful. And for latency, especially, local's great. And so that's an area that we appreciate them working on. For our devices, I think for the first one that I mentioned with the ability to onboard the devices that are already out there, the oven and the washer that you already have, Stacy, right? We want to make sure that that's also part of the mix. With cloud to cloud, I think, making that happen is easier, right? So there isn't a brand new chip that needs to go in. And our appliances are, when it's out there, it's out there. It's very hard for us to go out and put a new chip in, or even the software updates. A major update over the network is challenging, right? So we want to make sure the security and patches and that's there. But so there's a legacy element that we want to include. A lot of our devices are also pretty complex if you think about it, right? The washer with the multiple cycles and the elements of making sure that it's safe when it's operating with those large moving parts. These type of things require higher computing power, right? So we believe that C2C allows that. And I don't know if this one is relevant for this conversation, but I think when you look at sort of the historical elements of, let's say, somebody using a device and the ability to understand historically for many years, right? How that device is performing and using, like I said, about the predictive maintenance. And, that becomes pretty important for us, right? I think those elements that I mentioned are more efficient, I think more possible and more capable, I think, through cloud to cloud.
Okay, let's talk about security, because there's the physical security, there's the cybersecurity of a connected device. Can you talk about where y'all will be focusing in if you're working with other organizations?
Keep in mind, we just got started, but as we get to start to share some of our technical guidelines, of course, we will be connecting and working with all of the regulatory bodies as well as the different trade and technical organizations out there, right? But as it relates to safety, it's really two parts, right? In terms of security, right? So one is the data part, and then the second one is the physical part. Physical parts, I think, something that's unique to us, right? I think when you think about large devices and these moving parts, right? So washers, dryers, dishwashers, everything has some element that's either moving or under compression or under, for cooking devices, the heating that is there, right? We want to make sure, and that's something that is oftentimes it could be the physical life and death, right? I mean, that's something we cannot compromise. And making sure these work the way you intend it to work and they turn off when you intend them to turn off, extremely important for us, right? And that is even for us, that's paramount, right? So in the digital landscape, making sure physically these operate the way we want it to and we intend to. Super important. The data, I think there's no company in the world that's going to say we are 100%, hack proof. Data for us means kind of a slightly different thing. It's devices that you use for a long extended period of time. Tells us a lot about someone, right? Tells us a lot about, is that person in the home when such, events are happening? How frequently is this event happening? Allows us to think about, how many occupants are in this home and so on. In fact, a lot of this data can be, become a lot of insights that we need to make sure it's well protected over a long extended period of time.
Okay, so then how do we convince users, and what role will y'all play in convincing consumers to actually turn on the connectivity in their appliances? And I ask this because we're seeing the sale of connected appliances go up as more produced, but they're not being connected at incredibly high rates. So I'm curious if some of your work will be to try to drive consumers, like give them compelling reasons to actually connect their washers and dryers.
Compelling reasons to connect appliances, but even before that, I think the engagement and the usability of the experience of the engagement onboarding. I mean, we can all do a better job at that, right? So I think we are the first to admit that has not been, where we want it to be. The complexity of the setup, the complexity of making these work together. And when I think about, we got to make multiple brands work together, how complex is that, right? So doing a better job on that is certainly on one of our focus. But the engagement part is the key here, right? So, let's say, Stacy, because you bought your washer and because it's got Wi-Fi capabilities, and one day you said, I'm going to connect this, right? And you kind of went through the effort to connect it. The key is that you want to stay connected, and you'll find use cases over time, right? That will keep it connected, right? The worst is, and I think even AI speakers have kind of this problem too, which is you connect it and it's like really fun for a few days, and then it drops like dramatically. Appliances also have that problem. Some more than others, but I think the one maybe advantage we have is that because these, again, like I mentioned, the first job that they do, because it has this, whether you want to or not, you're going to continue to interact with your refrigerator, right? Yeah, and for many years, right? So each of those, that's a moment for us to make that better, right? So engagement, onboarding, extremely kind of one of our focus here. We know we need to do a better job there. And hopefully, I think, these use cases and the interoperability will make that a lot more fun. And I do think about, like too much, kind of pressing too much on the consumer. After all, we are a washer, right? We are the oven, right? So how much engagement we are going to impose on the consumer versus just, trying to be really useful, trying to be really sort of focused on what we do best, right?
All right. And final question. When can we expect to see product? I know that this is both a collaborative thing. You're not trying to set a new standard, but you are talking about, bringing data models across. And I guess eventually we might get an HCA certification or something to signify that certain appliances work together. But what is that product and when can we expect it?
So while we're still working through it, our goal is to get something out in 2022. The second half of 2022 is when we want to get something in the consumer's hands that makes these interoperable, right? I think the features and the kind of the big sort of algorithm stuff will come further down the line. But getting devices to work together, multiple brands, really that's kind of our first sort of target. And we are aiming to do this by the second half of 22. The certification or this logo or badging or, however we want to kind of certify it, we are still going through that process. At the moment, we don't anticipate any type of logo or any type of heavy in terms of certification. I think, the HCA is more industry facing, and, the devices that we produce and the consumers purchased is not a spontaneous purchase device, right? So people generally will do some research behind before they, you're not going to walk down the street, Stacey, and say, oh, look, I'm going to buy an oven, spontaneously, right? So we have multiple touch points where we can inform and provide information to our consumers on what devices work together and what that means for them and what are, the benefits of this. So we see it a little bit differently.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the time and the opportunity, Stacey.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening and please subscribe.
you.